Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Tech Leaders Launchpad live stream. I'm Andrew Murphy, a technology leadership trainer and coach, and these are the live streams that I share with you, the people that I learn from. I became a technology leader about 15 years ago, and when I started, there was no resources. There was nobody to help me. There was no books. There was no websites. There was no live streams to tell me how to be a better technology leader. And so I spent the past 15 years learning to be better. My mission now is to make sure that you don't have to do that. You can learn and you can get better by the things that exist out there, and I'm here to share them with you. One of the biggest things I'm here to share with you are the people that I learn from, my mentors and coaches. And today I have with me Clare Sudbery. Welcome to the live stream, Clare.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, no, you're very, very welcome. So, Clare, you're a tech coach. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so I'm a technical coach, which means that I work directly with teams, software engineering teams, specifically developers, to help them to improve their software engineering skills. So I will spend time with them working on their code bases and looking at skills like test-driven development, refactoring, continuous integration, and in an environment where it can be hands-on and it can be meaningful, so we can actually practice the skills that we're learning.
I like that. A lot of training that's out there focuses on knowledge acquisition, and we don't necessarily just want to know something different. We want to do something different. And practicing and actually exercising is how we go from that knowing something different to doing something different.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
So I've got my icebreaker question. Clare, what's your favorite gadget that is not your computer?
So I had a bit of a think about this, and I thought of these little headphones I've got, and they're a really, really nice design. So they're actually over-ear headphones, but you can see they're like, smaller than my hand because they fold up in this really clever way. And then the way that they go over my head, they go around the back of my head, and then they just slip over the top of my ear. They are actually over-ear headphones because I really don't like the ones that go in your ear because they just fall out. I don't know if there's something about my ears, but they either fall out or they feel uncomfortable. But over-ear headphones are really bulky, but these are really small. Unfortunately, I don't know who made them. They haven't got any kind of branding on them. I can't remember where I bought them. And I've tried looking for replacements, and I don't think they make them anymore. And these are going to fall apart pretty soon, I think. I've had them for a long time, but I do like them.
Yeah, that's a shame. I hate that thing where it's the perfect product and yet nobody makes it anymore.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really annoying.
So we're here today. We're going to talk about how do you hire juniors? How do you onboard them into your team? How do you make sure that it's a great experience for them and for the rest of the team? If you're joining us live, you've got a great opportunity to ask an expert in this area all of your questions. Please make sure you ask them in LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're watching this. We will try to get to as many of your questions as we can during the time we have available. So make sure you ask them so we can get to them. We've got a series of questions that I'm going to ask Clare, but really my goal with this stuff is to help you help the audience. And so, audience, ask questions, and then we can help you very, very directly rather than me trying to guess what you want to know. Why don't we start off with just a very quick, tell me about how you got into the job you're doing. What was the journey to becoming a technical coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have been a software engineer for 24 years now. Every time I answer that question, I think I have to check, has it gone up again yet? I think it's still 24. Is it 25? I think it's still 24. And my career is kind of split into two halves. So for the first 12 years, I was a jobbing software engineer. And I'll be honest, I kind of quite quickly got a bit disillusioned. So I was all excited and fresh out of doing a master's in computation. But then it was really hard for me to get people to give me the work that I found most interesting. And I felt really insecure a lot of the time. I didn't feel like I fitted in. I was always the only woman on the team. I quickly, after a few years, it was just the thing I did to make a living. And there were other things that took my attention, like becoming a mother and writing novels, that were the things that I was more passionate about. And I was just earning a living from writing software. And then I was laid off after about 12 years. And at that point, I was so disillusioned. I was like, I don't even want to find another job in tech. And I actually retrained as a high school maths teacher, which felt like something I'd always wanted to do. So teaching was something that I'd always been passionate about. And the idea of being a teacher seemed like an amazing thing to do. And I thought I walked into it with my eyes open. I knew it would be hard, but it was so hard. So the way that education is structured in the UK, particularly in England, teaching is a very, very difficult job. A lot of pressure is put on teachers. The expectations are really high, and the workload is kind of impossible. And I didn't get a lot of support from senior management. So people often think it wasn't the kids that were the problem. The kids were hard work. They were challenging, but they had problems of their own to deal with. Really, the problem was that I didn't get a lot of support from senior management. And also I discovered that teaching 30 children at once is not one of my strengths. Trying to pay attention to the needs of 30 teenagers simultaneously, keep them interested in maths of all things. I mean, everybody hates maths. Teenagers really hate maths. I thought that my passion for maths would carry me through, but no, it didn't. So I came back into IT. But what happened then was my attitude to the job was just completely different. Apart from anything else, I had been quite jealous of the kids when I was teaching, that they just got to learn all day, because I really like to learn. And I got excited about learning. I got excited about being what felt like new again, because at that point, I'd been out of the industry for 4 years. And I didn't think I was coming back. So I had made no attempt to keep my knowledge up to date. And also previously I'd been designing desktop software and I had never done any web development. When I came back in, I was doing web development, and it's actually quite hard to avoid web development in software engineering these days. The idea of purely desktop software is actually quite unusual. But it was completely new to me, doing things async, JavaScript. There was a whole bunch of stuff for me to learn. And so it felt like being brand new. It felt like being a brand new software engineer. Now, of course, I wasn't, because I did have 12 years of experience. And even though I didn't rate that experience initially, I began to realize that it was actually useful and meaningful, and did make a difference to how quickly I could learn. And I did actually already know a bunch of stuff. So I learned very quickly, and I progressed very quickly. And also because I was a bit older, it was easier for people to kind of imagine me in senior roles. So I got promoted very quickly and ended up in senior positions and leadership positions, and found my way into consulting. But particularly when I got into consulting, but also when I was in senior and leadership positions, my interest was always in mentoring, training, teaching. So even if I wasn't officially training, I was always helping my colleagues to learn new stuff and enjoying teaching them new stuff. And I used to say, it's great because I get to be a teacher without having to be a teacher. And so it's not surprising with hindsight that I've ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I did spend a few years working for consultancies as a consultant, but then eventually I went freelance a couple of years ago. And that's fantastic for me now, because it means that I can pick and choose. I can do the stuff that I'm really good at and that I really enjoy, and not have to do the stuff mostly that I'm not so good at and don't enjoy so much. And the stuff that I really enjoy is teaching and training and helping people to learn new skills and helping people to get better at what they're doing, and working with small groups of people in an environment where we can be really collaborative, and it's not just me standing at the front of a classroom with 30 bored teenagers in front of me.
Yeah,
so I guess does that answer your question?
It does. And when we first met, I really felt a connection with you, and it's not just because we share a similar accent. I think it's because we both kind of share this passion for teaching and kind of giving of ourselves to other people and helping them get better. Like, I really resonate with that part of your story. I loved being a coder. Like, I'm a nerd. I love writing code. I loved being a leader. I loved leading teams and building software. But the bit of my role as a leader that always made me the happiest was those times when I was like teaching and coaching and helping one of my leaders very specifically get better, or working with a team of my leaders and kind of going through concepts and ideas and helping them grow and develop. And that's what led me to do what I do now, which is that's effectively my day job, is taking all of those bits of being a technology leader that I really truly enjoyed, which is the teaching and the coaching side of it, and making that my day job. So it's a very, very similar to me in the way we ended up where we are, taking the bits of the job we enjoy and kind of doubling down on that.
And it's something that people often don't do and are not even encouraged to do. So what tends to happen, particularly within career progression frameworks, is that you're encouraged, I mean, you're even given checklists, and you're encouraged to find your weaknesses, find the things that you need to improve, and then put all of your focus into those things rather than the things that you're already good at. And there's this real tendency. A similar thing happens in retros. You say, what went well this week? What didn't go well this week? Now let's all spend the whole of the rest of the retro talking about what didn't go well. And we won't talk about what did go well. And actually, it is worth thinking about what you're good at and what has gone well for you, and doing more of that, and thinking about how can you dial that up? How can you focus on those strengths and create more space for them? Rather than, there can be this tendency to go, well, I'm already good at that, so it doesn't matter, it's not important, it's not valuable. Rather than saying, no, this is worth focusing on. And you can get so much more career satisfaction if you look at the things that you're good at and that you enjoy, and do more of that, rather than focusing on the things that you're not so good at and that you don't enjoy, and beating yourself up and saying, I must try to get better at those things. Doesn't mean not to say that you shouldn't, try and get better at things, but still, sometimes we spend too much focus on that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so speaking of getting better, and speaking of improving and learning and doubling down on strengths, we're here to talk about juniors and hiring and onboarding them, and focusing really on that side of both the people coming in, and as a leader, what we can do to make a great environment for those people. But I kind of want to start the conversation first with a why. Like, why should we do this? Senior engineers undoubtedly, for the same number of hours, produce more lines of code and better lines of code. So why should we hire juniors? Why should we actually onboard them? What are the benefits to the team, to the leader, to the company of even doing this thing in the first place?
And you could say that the answer is a no-brainer, that we need to bring more talent into the industry, and people who are new to the industry have to start somewhere. But actually, a lot of people are really resistant to hiring juniors. And the reasons, I think probably the most common reason is that teams will say, we don't have time to train juniors up. We don't want people on our team that need help, because that will be draining. That will mean that we have to spend time helping them to learn, and they will be slow because they will be learning. And that's just going to be, we don't have time for that. And actually, it's a difficult one to persuade people that they're wrong about. And also, I mean, telling people they're wrong is never a great idea, but it isn't a helpful attitude to take. And in fact, what people discover when they do have juniors on the team, and when they have the right attitude and they're encouraged to notice this, is that the business of helping juniors and the business of training juniors is really beneficial to the people who are doing that. So one of the reasons it's beneficial is because if you have to explain something to somebody else, you deepen your own understanding. And quite a lot of the time, people are using particular skills every day, and they're using particular technologies every day. And so therefore they assume they know it inside out until they have to explain it to somebody else. And then they realize there are actually gaps in their knowledge. And there are things that they've just sort of assumed that they knew, but they don't really. And there are things that they're doing that they assumed they knew why they were doing them until somebody asked them, and then they realize they don't. And having those questions asked of you, people asking why you're doing what you're doing and what you're doing, is really useful. It helps you to re-examine what you're doing. So it helps teams to re-examine what they're doing and why they're doing it. So not how they're writing the code, what they're writing, how their code is structured, the processes that they're using every day. If things are being questioned in a way that where somebody actually needs an answer because they're learning about it, that makes you really pay attention to what you're doing, and it deepens your own understanding. And it also means that because it's not just about the technologies and the tools and the skills that people have in the abstract sense, it's also about their own domains and their own code bases. That often as well, people think they know what's going on until they have to explain it to somebody else. And then they realize they don't actually quite understand this particular bit of the code base, or this particular bit of the architecture, or why it is that something's done in a particular way. Or there might be something that they've always known was a bit kind of, not great, but they've become blind to it because they're just so used to it. But having to explain it to somebody else and having to take somebody else through the pain of doing something in a particular, dysfunctional way increases the motivation to fix it and make it better. But the other thing is that I think people assume that juniors are going to arrive empty, with no knowledge and no skills. And that's not true either. They will have knowledge and they will have skills. It might not be the exact knowledge of the exact technologies that you're using or of the domain that you're in, but they will have other knowledge and other skills. They will arrive as human beings who have already learned other things in other contexts, and those things will be useful. And also, they won't necessarily be young either. There's often an assumption that they'll be really young and they'll be straight out of college. Not necessarily true. You get a lot of career changes, and they bring a lot with them. So they've learned a lot of useful skills from other industries and other jobs that will make a difference. And there's also that thing about diverse perspectives. So people have probably heard about how racial diversity and gender diversity and all of the different kinds of diversities are all really beneficial to teams because they bring different perspectives. There's also the life journey diversity, that people who've done other jobs and had other life experiences, they will stimulate your team. They will have other ways of thinking about things and other ways of looking at things that will give you a bit of a refresher. They'll have ideas. They'll have useful ideas that they can contribute to your team. They're not they're not just waiting for you to teach them and then they'll know stuff. They will already know stuff. And it can be just incredibly stimulating to have that fresh blood and have people asking lots of questions. Because another thing that happens is when you only hire seniors, even if they have questions that they would like to ask, they often don't, because they think, I'm supposed to be a senior. I've been given this job because I've persuaded these people that I'm really experienced and I know loads of stuff. So if there are areas that I'm unsure about, I'm not going to be honest about that, because I'm going to worry that that's going to show me up as being not as experienced or knowledgeable as they thought I was. But when you have people who are explicitly learning, then they are as long as you create a positive environment for them, then they're much more likely to ask those really useful questions. And that whole thing is just really stimulating for the team as a whole.
I lost count of the number of things that I wanted to pick up on in that massive thread. I was alternating between completely rapt listening to you speaking and like wanting to remember points to come back to. A couple that I can remember, just what you mentioned then, this culture we have as an industry to focus on knowledge as being the thing that's valued. I think there's a lot of issues with that in our industry, and it leads to exactly what you're saying there. If you ever say the words "I don't know," it feels like it takes some power away from you, when it shouldn't. But
Yes.
it's the way that a lot of people fear it's kind of understood. And another thing I kind of want to touch on as well is the point you made about juniors not being empty when you hire them. I've worked with a lot of people who have transitioned career from something outside of technology to technology, and I am just always in awe of the amount of knowledge and experience that they bring with them from those industries, and how valuable that is. I was running an agency, and we hired a junior, and she'd come from an actuarial background. So, you know, she used to be an actuary, self-taught herself engineering, and then became an engineer. And, you know, her way of seeing problems, her incredibly analytical mind was hugely valuable, because, you know, the fact is, to be an actuary, you kind of have to have a similar mindset. Like, you have to understand how to take a massive problem, break it down into smaller bits, and, you know, solve those problems individually, and then combine everything together into a larger solution. There's hugely transferable skill sets there, and I think that's something we forget about as well. Is like engineering, yes, there's the knowledge of the frameworks and the libraries, but I don't know about you, the thing I struggled with when I learned to code wasn't that. The thing I struggled with was, how do you break this thing down? How do you think about this problem? How do you kind of, you know, rationalize the problem into a solution before you even put fingers to keyboard and write code? And that's something that you can learn outside of the technology industry.
Yeah. I mean, that thing you said about the emphasis on knowledge, I absolutely agree. I think a lot of our recruitment processes and interview processes, technical interviews, are just completely wrong-headed. And what we tend to do is, and I've just seen it so many times, that you'll see somebody come out of an interview and say, "Oh my God, we just interviewed this developer and they'd never heard of blah, or they didn't know about blah." And you're like, well, okay, but they probably have. So this is people who aren't completely new, and they've been working in this industry for a while, and the reason they don't know about that particular thing is because they haven't needed to. People often don't realize how little overlap there can be between the skills required and the knowledge required in different roles, even when it looks like the same role. And, you know, it's not about how. And the other thing is, not everybody's got a great memory. I haven't. You know, I Google stuff all the time, and I can Google stuff all the time, and there is nothing preventing me from doing that. And I can be a really effective developer who forgets stuff and then looks it up. And I am not going to be able to regurgitate that stuff in an interview scenario. But when I'm writing code, it doesn't matter. It's not the important thing. The important thing is that I have good analytical skills, that I know how to pull a problem apart. I know what questions to ask. I know how to think about solving problems. And none of that requires me to have an encyclopedic knowledge of anything. I can look stuff up when I need to. And yeah, it really frustrates me. But that thing about, if you have that emphasis on what do you know rather than how do you know, so to speak, you know, do you know how to do things rather than do you just remember, you know, random details? If you allow that people will sometimes forget things and will need to look things up and will need to learn specifics because they haven't used these particular specifics before, but what they have used is the broader skills that are required in software engineering, then you create an environment where people don't feel comfortable being honest about what they know. And then that means that when people have to look stuff up, they have to do it in secret. And that slows them down. And when there's stuff that they're unsure about, instead of asking the people who are the best placed to help them, they have to go off and find out in secret. And that slows them down. And it also sometimes means that people will just sort of guess. And they will proceed not really being quite sure what they're doing, but not feeling able to ask. So it also makes them less effective. Because you need people to have what they need in order to do their job. And if you create an environment that emphasizes learning and celebrates it, then you create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions. So going back to that thing I said earlier, that you might have seniors who don't know stuff, but they're not telling you because they think that you hired them on an assumption that they know a bunch of stuff, and they don't want to, you know, be found out. They're worried that you might think less of them. If you are in the habit of hiring juniors, then that also means you're in the habit of having people around who ask lots of questions. And if you make sure that you're creating a good environment for those juniors, where you encourage questions and ask them without judgment, answer them without judgment, then you're also creating an environment where all of your seniors can also ask questions and have them answered without judgment. So creating that environment where it's okay to say, I don't know, is so important. And you said earlier, you know, that sometimes people don't, that it's really important for people to be able to say that. And in my, you know, my journey through tech, I am incredibly grateful to all of the senior and leadership people I've worked with who would confidently and happily say, I don't know, because all of those people were such fantastic role models. They told me that it was okay to say, I don't know. And it means everybody in the room can kind of heave a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, if this person is saying, I don't know, this person who's really highly regarded, really senior, clearly knows their stuff, then it must mean that it's okay for me to say, I don't know. And when I've seen people who I had enormous respect for, who there was no doubt that they knew what they were doing. There was no, everybody knew they were great at their jobs, but they would regularly say, what's that? I don't know. Or what's this thing? I've forgotten. Or I have never heard of this thing. What's that? But they would say it with such confidence that it wouldn't even occur to you to judge them. In fact, the opposite. Rather than judging them for it, you would respect them for it. You would think better of them because they were asking those questions. And to see somebody else model that behavior. So now I try to model that behavior, is really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. It's something that I try and model myself. I think every leader who's watching this and listening to this, encourage you to do that, to emulate that. Great. So that's the why. Let's get into the how a little bit. What are the best ways to kind of find and hire juniors? You know, I run the CTO School Australia meetup along with a bunch of great people, and there's a Slack community that we have. And somebody asked earlier, you know, what about juniors? And I remember when I used to put an advert up on a job board for a junior engineer, I would literally get hundreds, sometimes 600 applicants coming through. And it was just such a chore. There's no other word for it, to go from 600 to kind of finding the right person. Was I making a mistake in the first place by putting the job advert on a job board? Like, what are the best ways to find, hire, and onboard junior people?
So there's a few things in there, actually. So one is that it's a really good idea, if you're hiring juniors, to pay a really I mean, this is a good idea for all recruitment, but to pay really strong attention to diversity. And there's a lot of help with juniors, because there are a lot of groups out there that are actually designed to help particular underrepresented groups. So there are women in tech groups, there are Black women in tech groups, there are Black people in tech groups, there are, you know, gay people in tech groups. There are lots of these people that you can directly approach them and say, you know, we have these vacancies. So you're in a really good position to kind of really try and absolutely open the doors to people who are underrepresented and be really welcoming to them. And then, yes, you are going to have a lot of numbers probably. But that is also one of the benefits of hiring juniors. Now, I know the industry is a bit different at the moment because there's been a lot of layoffs. So actually the pool of talent is bigger than it was, because it used to be only a couple of years ago, it was really hard to hire, particularly into senior positions, because you were facing a lot of competition. That has changed a bit, but it's still the case that, you know, you're going to get a lot more interest from juniors than you are if you're trying to hire seniors. So you have got more choice. But then how do you filter those people? So one of the things, this might be slightly controversial, one of the things I would say is there is this tendency to think, oh no, how do we make sure we get the good ones? And with this idea being that there's a lot of these people are going to be a bit rubbish, and we want to make sure that we don't get those ones. We want to make sure that we filter out the rubbish ones and only get the good ones. And what I would say is, you know what? The vast majority of them are going to be good. The vast majority of them are going to be capable of being good. Whether they succeed or not, whether they do a good job in your organization is a lot more to do with what you do with them, how you treat them, what opportunities you give them, whether you bring them into an open environment that it celebrates and encourages learning and wants people to ask questions and will happily answer those questions. That's what makes a difference, to particularly to whether juniors succeed. It's not whether you found the right person, it's what you do with that person once you hire them that really makes the difference. So I would say let go of some of that anxiety about whether we're going to get the right ones. There is nothing you can do about the fact that most of those people are not going to get a job. There is no point with you. Most of those people are not going to get one of your jobs because you don't have as many vacancies as you have applicants. That's just the way it is. You can't feel guilty about that. So, you know, accept that you are going to turn people down who could be really good. Don't get hung up on making sure that you find the best ones, because whether they're the best ones or not is actually going to depend on what you do with them after you've hired them. It's not about whether you found the best, whether you're like, you know, searching for a needle in a haystack, because most of them are capable of being good. So then it just becomes a question of filtering for aptitude and attitude rather than knowledge, particularly for juniors, because they're not going to have much knowledge anyway. So you're finding out what is their attitude to learning. Do they enjoy learning? Do they put a lot of emphasis on learning? Are they self-starters to some extent? You know, are they able to structure their own learning? You can ask a lot of questions around that, and give them a coding test. You know, a simple coding test that just gives you some idea. Nothing complicated. There are lots of platforms out there that will that will provide tests and mark them for you. And then, you know, pick the people who are at the top of that list, but don't worry too much about it. You know, don't spend ages like on that bit of it. The thing that you should be investing in is what you do with them after you've hired them. So yes, you're going to have to filter them out, and yes, you're going to have to reject some people who would probably be great. That's just the way it is. I would say that if you can spend some time talking to them. So I used to help to run the Made Tech Academy. So Made Tech is a consultancy in the UK. They have an academy program where they hire juniors and pay them for a 12-week boot camp. And then at the end of the boot camp, they then progress into being consultants within the organization, junior consultants. And when we were hiring for that, what we used to do was, first of all, we gave them a coding test, which we would score. We would also give them a really quick phone interview with one of our recruitment team. And it was really quick, but it was just to get a bit of an idea of their kind of attitude and aptitude. And then what we did was we had interview days where we would just spend a whole day and bring a lot of people in and get them to pair with each other. So they would get to meet each other. They would, you know, there'd be a few talks from people in the company. We would put them into groups to do group activities, and we would get them to pair with each other. And when they were pairing with each other, they would be observed by and helped a little bit by some of our engineers. And not everybody would be invited to those interview days, but it's quite a good way of getting a lot of people in a short amount of time. And really getting some focused feedback, but also making sure that we're not purely relying on things like coding tests. So we get to actually meet them and talk to them and give them an opportunity to show their strengths in a different context. And that did allow us to, you know, whittle it down. I mean, granted, we had a lot of places available, so between 12 and 20 places typically on our academy program is what we were recruiting for. But that is another thing that I would recommend. I know it's work and it's an investment as well, because for those 12 weeks those people weren't producing any revenue for the company. But they then join as juniors who, and this is, I don't like this really, but it's just an economic fact that you can pay juniors lower wages. So they're actually a good investment. And you get a lot out of them. You know, it's because they're really eager to learn. They really want to do well. They're highly motivated. And also you get to shape them to write the kind of software that you want to write in the way that you want to write it. And you can teach them, you get them early on, and you get to shape the way that they're working. So it is worth that investment. But even if you can't have an academy program, it's still the investment of bringing on juniors and then having them learn within teams. The return that you get on that investment is really high.
Yeah, I really like the shift in mindset of, you know, I was looking at those 600 CVs and going, oh my God, that's a problem. That's terrible. And you just completely shifted my mindset to go, actually, that's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity to have that number of people in front of you.
Yeah.
And that shifting mindset is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And to know that you can give opportunities is a good feeling.
Yeah. I think, you know, we often get stuck in our industry with this idea that, you know, there's not enough time in the day to do things. There's, you know, we're always kind of scrambling for the next feature, the next release, and sometimes to kind of sit back and go, no, actually, we need to do this sustainably. This industry needs to be sustainable, and the only way you get seniors is if they start off as juniors.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of focus. So, you know, we know the why, we know how to kind of get people at the start of that journey. Once we start actually moving juniors into our feature teams, our production teams, you know, the teams that are actually producing value for the business, what are some of the common challenges that teams face with having juniors in those kind of production teams, and how can we overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I mean, the obvious one is time. Like you said, everybody's always busy. There's always a rush to meet the next deadline. People don't feel like they have time to devote to helping juniors. And then the corollary to that is that juniors aren't given help. And then that becomes a really demoralizing experience for them. They're left on their own. They're floundering. They don't feel like they know what they're doing, but they don't feel able to ask for help because they're worried, because everybody's busy and they don't want to be a nuisance. And that the answer to that is the same answer for all of the things that software teams don't do because they don't think they have time. Because that's not the only thing that software teams don't do because they don't think they have time. They don't write tests, and they don't refactor, and they don't sort out their technical debt. And, you know, there's like, and they don't fix that bug that's been there forever because they feel like they don't have time. And there is, I can't manufacture time. There is always a shortage of time, but all of these things that I've mentioned are things that actually cost time if you don't address them early. So if you don't pay attention to your juniors, then they are going to become more and more of a drain. They're going to need more and more help, and they're also going to become more and more demoralized and much less likely to be effective. So you're just going to be paying salaries for people who aren't able to contribute effectively, and that's not cost effective, and that doesn't, in the long run, that doesn't save you time. So that little bit of an upfront investment, and it's not a lot, you know, juniors don't need their hands holding 7 or 8 hours a day. They just need a little bit of investment. They just need a little bit of help. There are lots of things you can do where you can give them a little bit of help and then send them off. So what, you know, it's one of the skills of teaching and mentoring is that it's often really tempting when somebody asks you, how do I do this? You say, oh, I'll show you. And then you do it for them. And then they don't actually learn very much from that, because they didn't quite follow, and you were going really fast, and they didn't feel able to ask questions, and they know you're busy. And no, you say, well, actually, try doing it like this, and then get them to do it. And then you can send them away to practice. You don't have to stay there with them while they're doing that. You just point them in the right direction. And that actually is not as much as investment as you think. But like I said before, it actually has payoffs, because it gets you thinking about things in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have been. It gives you that fresh perspective, which might well save you time, because you might then not go off and do a whole bunch of work before realizing that you had gone down the wrong path, because answering the question of the junior has made you think about things a bit more effectively. So yes, it feels like a drain, but the more you do it, the more you realize the benefits, and you can see the benefits, and that it was worth it. And actually it saved you time in the long run. And then what you have to do is to pay attention to those benefits. So spend a little bit of time, not all your time, but a little bit of time with the juniors. Make sure they feel comfortable, make sure they feel safe, make sure they're able to ask questions, and that you're always prepared to take a little bit of time to answer those questions. But then pay attention to the benefits, pay attention to how quickly they learn as a result. Pay attention every time they add something new or do something good for your team, and then highlight it and say, look at this great thing this junior has contributed. They wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't have helped them, if we hadn't have hired them in the first place. Look at how we've benefited from that. So pay attention to it, and then highlight it when it happens, so that you can remind yourselves of why it is worth it. And you do need leadership who are going to go on that journey with you, so it's probably not enough. I mean, depending on how strong a character it is, it's probably not enough to just have one team member that recognizes the benefit of juniors, particularly if leadership isn't on board. You need people at the top who are prepared to say, we're going to push that deadline back, because we want to make sure we're doing things properly, and because we recognize that when we don't invest, we end up with more bugs, we end up with more tech debt, we end up later down the line having to spend time on things that we shouldn't have had to spend time on. Those future deadlines get pushed back for months, because we're all busy fixing all of these bugs, or because we can't release because A, B, C, D. A lot of the things that feel like it's urgent and you have to do it now, you're just storing up pain for the long term. And that applies to helping juniors as well.
Yeah, I really like that analogy to the other things, these other hygiene things we have to do, like tech debt and tests and stuff. I think there's huge parallels there that you're highlighting. And one of the things with that is it's the job. The audience of this live stream is tech leaders and aspiring tech leaders, and it's talking to you very directly right now, audience. It's your job to balance those things. It's your job to decide when we pay down tech debt versus incurred tech debt. It's your job to ensure that the stability, the safety, the security, the reliability of the platform is where it needs to be. And that doesn't mean we turn everything up to 11, but it also doesn't mean we turn everything off. It's your job to balance those things. And I like this idea of adding juniors into that mix as another hygiene thing, another thing we kind of have to decide. And the trade-off in the future for that is, I often like in organizations to build what I call a conveyor belt of talent, where if you have somebody leave, if you have, say, a senior leave, then it's really expensive and really time consuming to replace a senior with another senior, and there's huge opportunity cost, there's huge risk to the organization. If I can have a senior leave and then just have everybody go ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk up the stack, and then replace that with a junior at the bottom, it's much less risk, it's much less cost. It's just much better for everybody. But you can only do that if you keep injecting juniors at the bottom of the conveyor belt.
Yeah, that is a great point. Yeah, that's a really good point. And also that thing about it's your job. It's also your job as technical leads to do that thing I said before of making focused investments in things like bringing on juniors, and then paying attention to the benefits and highlighting them, making sure that everybody notices, that you notice, and then you draw it to everybody else's attention. Look, see, this thing that we did was a good idea because this.
Yeah, and it helps the juniors. Like the juniors feel rewarded and recognized, and keeps their motivation up, and kind of helps them, keep going, because it's hard. It's hard learning a skill. It's hard knowing that you're bothering people when you need help. Like that emotional place that juniors are in.
Yeah.
I don't think we empathize with that.
Yeah, you have to be aware of that. Yeah,
20 years, 24 years since we were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really important to remember how daunting it is to be new to a team, particularly if you're the only junior or one of a small number of juniors, that you're going to be looking at all of these people, and it's all their level of knowledge and experience is going to seem unattainable. And you're going to be really worried about that. Actually, I know you're going to include it in the links, but it's worth me mentioning. I have a whole talk that I do called Let's Stop Making Each Other Feel Stupid. And part of that is something that I call the Stupidity Manifesto, which is about let's stop making each other feel stupid. Let's be honest about when we don't know things, so that we make it a lot easier for other people to feel better about it when they don't know things. And that really, really applies to juniors. Let them know that the journey never ends. We're all learning all the time. And it is absolutely fine. It's not a problem when you don't know things, because it's true for all of us.
Yeah, love that. Love that. It's back to that power of saying I don't know, being open and vulnerable with your lack of knowledge. Like there is no real downside in a psychologically safe environment. There's no real downside to doing that, and it's something we should encourage. We're reaching the top of the hour. I cannot believe we've been talking for 50 minutes. It feels like it's gone like that.
I agree. Yeah.
I feel like we could do another 50 minutes if it wasn't for the fact that it's almost midnight in Melbourne, and I know you have somewhere to be. But yeah, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Let's wrap up. Next time on the Tech Leaders Launchpad live stream, I've got Phil Hack. If you don't know Phil Hack, he used to work at GitHub and then Microsoft. And we're going to talk about why you should treat your team as mature professionals and active volunteers. And it's basically all about this idea that people choose to come to work. Very, very few people in modern society have to work for your company. They have chosen the job that's in front of them, and we need to recognize and accept that these people are volunteers in the job they do. They're not indentured servants, and how you can kind of breed that into everything that you do as a leader. So I'm genuinely really looking forward to chatting with Phil. I met him in Porto at a conference and had a great number of conversations with him over port. This one, unfortunately, will not be over port. It'll probably be over a cup of tea, but I'm looking forward to that. As always, if you want to follow these live streams, please feel free to subscribe if you're on YouTube, follow me if you're on LinkedIn, and subscribe if you're on Twitch. I recommend YouTube. LinkedIn's user experience is not as good as YouTube. As good as YouTube, it is a better user experience on YouTube. So if you are currently watching me on LinkedIn, I suggest you move over to YouTube, but it is completely your choice. Also, if you want to have a chat with me, there's a QR code on the left. You can book 20 minutes into my calendar, and we can talk about anything to do with technology leadership that you want to have a chat about. Claire, do you want to anything you want to point people at, things you want people to know about?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Stupidity Manifesto. There'll be a link available. And I also had a podcast. So there are 26 episodes of the Making Tech Better podcast, which are all still absolutely worth listening to. Every episode is an interview with an industry professional, an expert in a particular area. So there are lots of different areas covered to do with software engineering, but it's well worth a look. And there'll be a link available for that too.
Awesome. And you've also got your own website, Sudbery Software Engineer Limited.
That's right.
And
yes.
we'll share that as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Once again, thank you so much, Claire, for joining me. I love this conversation. I'm definitely going to ask you back on because I don't feel like we got anywhere near the bottom of this topic, and we need to spend another 50 minutes talking about it.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise.